Mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od. Mitzvah's ner Chanukah, mitzvah chaviva hi ad ma'od. We see this, that the mitzvah of ner Chanukah is dear to us, it's beloved. Mitzvah's ner Chanukah chaviva hi ad ma'od. And we know that Chanukah candles was not a deraisa. It came at the time of the Bayis Sheni. Chanukah is what we're holding on to, is the end. Before Mashiach comes, the light of Chanukah. And yet we see that the Rambam's Lashon is, Mitzvahs ner Chanukah, chaviva hi ad ma'od. So what's the chavivus of ner Chanukah? I explained this in Shul many years ago. The chavivus of the mitzvah of ner Chanukah, because you know, the Swarm tell us, the Kadmanim talk about this a lot, that every mitzvah of the Tag mitzvahs corresponds to a different part of who we are. To the kaimas ha'adam, the eyes, the ears, ramach neshasa. Every mitzvah, mitzvahs I say and loisa I say, corresponds to a different part of us. But the Sfarim tell us that when it comes to Ner Chanukah is Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. Ner Havaya Nishmas Adam. Meaning that the Ner Chanukah, which is not a deraisa, but the Ner Chanukah is Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. Whereas all the other mitzvahs I say and loisa I say correspond to different parts of us, pieces of us. But the etzem, the neshama v'yid, the ner havaya, the ner Hashem nishmas adam, is the ner Chanukah. Why? Now everybody here also knows that the Pnei Yeshua asks, and others talk about this. This is a big tumult in all the Achrayim. That Al Pi Halach, everybody knows that it really wasn't even necessary to find the Pachshem, and it wasn't necessary to find that oil because of the din of Tumah Hutra B'Tziva. So Pnei Yeshua asks, what's the whole inyan of this? Why was it necessary? Why was it necessary to have this miracle of the Pachshem, which is the miracle of Chanukah, which is the miracle of Chassidus? Why was it necessary? Al Pi Halacha, we didn't have to wait. We could have lit, the Kahanim could have taken care of it without waiting for the Shem to be prepared. We didn't need the Nes of Chanukah. So Menachem Nosson speaks about this, Nosson speaks about the Nukudei Halachas, and others Tzaddikim talk about the Inyan about Tzayir Chaftali. Very, very simply put, the best way that I've been able to share this with Chevra is by telling the story of, a little bit of a story about my father, Zichron Levacha. Now there are many Chevra here that knew my father. One of the Chaverim sitting over there has actually a son that's named after my father. It was the first boy that was named after my father, B'Tzala. The first boy was named after my father, Zichron Levacha. And my father was a Hungarian Jew, a survivor of Mauthausen. I'm sure you heard of that place. And there's a story that I share with the Mitzvah Bacham. So I can't hold up a menorah in front of a boy's face. I'd probably get arrested for doing something like that. And I don't have the words, nor do I have the toenail of the Tzemach Tzedek to give over that v'chazakta v'yisalish, like I shared with you last year, when Lubavitch Rebbe gave me chizik when he shook his arm at me. V'chazakta v'yisalish. He didn't say the words, but I'm still feeling it. But what I do with the Bar Mitzvah boys in shul is the following. Since my father was nifter, I take out my father's tefillin and I unwrap them and I show them to the Bar Mitzvah boy, who until that point when I was saying some Torah was trying to be polite. But when he sees this old pair of tefillin, and I show him that the tefillin bag says on it, the date is, the Tafresh says 1936, Tafresh Harivav, a very old and beaten tefillin bag, and I tell them the following. Now listen, Chevra, I'm sure many of you know this story, and it got around. While my father was alive, I was careful not to tell this Rabbi, because my father would get back to him and be very upset with me. And I hope that he's meichel me now, because I'm trying to be mefarsim b'neis. So I'll pursue minisa. I hope he's okay with it. But my father, when it was time for me to put on tefillin the first time, so I had a brand new pair of tefillin that we bought in Williamsburg from a famous sofer, Baron Pollack, and I was all excited to go to shul to put on tefillin for the first time, a month before the mitzvah. And my father took out his tefillin. Now we were going to go to shul together. My father took out his tefillin, and he told me, I want you to put on my tefillin first. And I was not pleased with that. I didn't understand, why should I put on an old pair of tefillin? I have my beautiful, fresh tefillin. Why should I put on an old pair of tefillin? That's Aleph and Beis. I'm a lefty. I said to my father, Daddy, I'm a lefty. My father said, you're also not 13. Just do what I tell you. Just put on your left arm, it's okay. I put the tefillin on and Shayad and Shavash. And there are only a few times I can count, really just on maybe 3-4 fingers, that I ever saw my father get very worked up, very emotional. And I've never seen him like this. His only son, putting on tefillin. And my father told me, say Kriya Shema. And I said Kriya Shema. And then my father told me the following. He said to me that when it came time for me to part from my father, meaning my grandfather, who I'm named after. So the young men who were able to go to the army, slave labor, were being taken on a train. In the end, most of them ended up in concentration camp. They were being taken on a train. And the parents and the grandparents, a short time later, were taken to Auschwitz. And my grandfather went with my father to the station. They were allowed to go and take them to the station. And my grandfather, Hashem Yikam Damav, my grandfather told my father that this is the last time we're going to see each other in this world. And my father told this to me while I'm sitting there with his tefillin on. My father said to his father, why are you saying that? We heard the Americans are not far, the Russians are not far, the war is going to be ending. But my grandfather just said, we're not going to see each other in this world. But you make sure not to miss one day of tefillin. No matter what happens to you, don't miss a day of tefillin. And we'll see each other when you're 120. And that was the last time my father saw his father. And to this day, we don't know how my father wore those tefillin in concentration camp. There was a museum not far from here that wanted to buy the tefillin many years ago. They heard about the Mauthausen tefillin. Because not only did my father put on these tefillin, which was a risk, if you were caught with tefillin, they would kill you on the spot, but there were hundreds and hundreds of Jews who would take turns waiting to put on these tefillin to say Shema, and not to get caught, not to get killed. So I'm listening to this, and my father said to me, that I was wearing the tefillin every day in concentration camp. Again, we don't know how he did that. And we asked many times, and he said, a Jew has to find a way. He found a way. My father said that it was not long before the liberation that it was after a terrible day of backbreaking slave labor, which was a nace to survive each day. And they were lying there on the planks in the bunk, and all of a sudden, very late in the night, the Germans, Yamach Shemam, come into the bunk screaming and yelling and hitting them with dogs and tell him to undress, fast, undress. My father thought that was it, they were finished. He didn't know what to do with his tefillin, if they see the tefillin. So he didn't know if they're going to kill him right now or later. So he took off his shmatis and he wrapped the tefillin inside. And they were hitting them to go outside. And when they came outside, my father said there was a huge pit. And there was a fire coming out from this pit, and there was some sort of a bulldozer there. And all the Jews had to throw their things onto the floor. And the bulldozer was pushing everything into the fire because the Germans wanted to disinfect that place because the Jews were covered with lice. Everything was filled with lice. And the Germans, Yimach Shemam, were afraid to get sick. So they weren't killing the Jews yet, these Jews in the bunk. They were taking them away to spray them somewhere, to spritz them with some disinfectant. But all of their shmatas were being burned, and the entire bunk was burned down. So my father said to me, when I'm sitting there with his tefillin on that month before my bar mitzvahs, my father said to me that at that moment, I felt that this is the end. Until now, I felt that Hashem's Baruch was with me, because I heard my father saying to me, put on tefillin every day. And Hashem's Baruch will watch over you and you'll survive. And how could it be that after all that I've been through and I kept the tefillin, that now finally, I'm not going to have them anymore? My father told me that he didn't know what to do, and he felt that he was finished. It was time for Yeyush. So he wrapped them up inside of his shmatas, and he was naked, and he put them on the ground there with everything else. And then they were hitting them, and they went someplace for a while. And they spritzed them with these chemicals. And then they brought them back to some new bunk, and they gave them some new pajamas or something, some new filthy shmatas. And my father said they were passing the fire, and every single thing was in the fire, except he saw that on the edge of the fire was the bag of his tefillin. And he told me he doesn't know, because he wrapped the tefillin into the pajamas. And everything of the Germans are very, very big medaktakim. Nothing is left behind by them. And the tefillin was sitting there. My father looked, a lot of people were there, and my father went and he grabbed it, and he put it, and he was wearing these tefillin till around 30 years ago when the ICS couldn't stay anymore. And the tefillin was a different story. My father told me this story when it came time for me to put on tefillin. And he didn't tell me the words, V'chazakta v'ha'isel ish. He didn't tell me those words. But I saw it in his eyes. Because what the Tzemach Tzedek was saying to Menachem Manish, and what is happening right now in this room and in the world, and what happened by Chanukah, it's all one thing. It's one Ishtalshlus. And what is that? By the time of the Yevanim, when Chanukah happened, it was very the end of Nevuah. The Beis HaMikdash was very mischalel. And for years they couldn't go in. And they would slum them in the Heichel. So we can't even imagine how we felt at that time. How we felt the tohu, the vohu, the choshech, and the sahom. Because there's nothing worse in the world. I was walking in Meir Sharm, and there was a Yid that called out to me. I didn't know who he was, a beautiful, sweet Chassidus Yid. And he saw that I was a little bit fablunge, that I was looking for something, and he asked me if he could help. He knew my name. He said he heard some shiurim for me. He's American. And he asked me could we talk a little bit? And really I just wanted directions. But he also wanted directions. So he asked me, could we talk a little bit? And we walked the whole way. I forgot about the thing I had to get. But he was telling me he's about some of the sorrows he's been through, and he doesn't know if he believes anymore in the Rebbeinu Shalom. This guy, long bid and pay it. He doesn't know if he believes. He says, I have such sveikis and amuna, it's hard for me to say a word in davening. So we felt that way as a people. In a certain way, 2 years ago, that horrible Shmini Atzeres, when it happened, I first heard somebody came to whisper in my ear that they heard that there were 400 Jews that were killed. And many Jews were taken, and soldiers were taken hostage. There's that feeling that a person has that Chalila, that the Baruch Shalom is done with you. She'adam magishu mushlach, that he's thrown away. That the Baruch Shalom doesn't care. That the Baruch Shalom is not looking at you, he's not paying attention to you. That your life doesn't mean anything to him anymore. There isn't a person here, unless you're somebody that doesn't think what everybody here has felt at times. Mushlach. Ki'ilu, the Baruch Shalom doesn't care about you. And then what happened? So we felt that way by Hanukkah. And it's true, the Pnei Yeshua is right. We didn't have to have a Pach Shem, and it's one of the Chassidus God. We'd have to have this nace. But look what Hashem Zbach did. Mitzvahs ner Hanukkah. Chavivehi ad ma'od. Because there's nothing that gives you back your neshama. Like that feeling when you thought that the Baruch Shalom is finished with you, that he doesn't love you. Some of you have felt that your wife doesn't love you, that Chalila, your kid doesn't love you. And you know that it's hard to continue on living with that feeling if you feel that. It's hard to go on living. When you think the one who created you doesn't think about you, doesn't care about you. And then all of a sudden, somehow in your life you find what? A pach of Shem and Tahar. That's munach b'chais mashakayim gadol. Untouched. Somehow something happened. My father told me that's what happened that day. My father told me that when I found the tefillin, the Baruch Shalom gave me back my neshama. I didn't care anymore if they were going to kill me. Because it didn't make a difference. My father said, it didn't make a difference to me anymore. That's what he told me by when I was putting on tefillin. It didn't make a difference to me because all I cared about was that I'm still with him. He's still with me. And when I found the tefillin, that was my pach. My father didn't say about the Shema, but it was my father saying, that's my jar of oil. It wasn't necessary. It didn't have to be. They could have lit some other oil. They would have, because Thomas Hutter Betziver. But kamach mitzvahs nechanach havivehi ad ma'od ner Hashem nishmas adam. When the Baal Shem HaKadosh came into the world, you all know that it was described by the Nisim, by the Tzaddikim, that the world was in a state of hisalfus, that the Jewish world was faint, was dying. Because after what happened with the pogroms, and before that what happened to Maisa with Shabtai Tzvi Yimach Shemai, and the way the Jews were living and what was going on, the feeling was that we were mushlachim, that we weren't anymore in Hashem's heart, in Hashem's eyes. And then Yev Kaddish Mishmai Kanachis. And the Baruch Shalom sent the Heilige Baal Shem to the world. Yisrael Asher B'chai Aspire. And the Baal Shem HaKadosh went to every Jew, and without holding up a candle, he held a candle in front of each Jew, and he said to each and every Jew, V'chazakte v'yisel ha'ish. The Baal Shem himself was a nace of Chanukah. That in this world we found a Pach Shem, and it's Munach B'chais Moshakan Gadol, with the Chaisim of the Baruch Shalom, and Mezrit Shemagid, and all the Talmidei Baal Shem, and the Baal Tanya. When there was that Gzeira, where the Baal Tanya was taken to jail, we know that there was a Gzeira that was over the whole Baal Shem HaKadosh, and the whole Chassidus. There was a Gzeira. There was a Sakana. So Kama Chaviva Yad Kislev, Kama Chaviva Mitzvahs ner Chanukah. What draws you to Tzama? What's drawing the world to Chassidus? You know, I saw recently in an article, they didn't say the name of this Talmid Chacham, but there was a Talmid Chacham who grew up in the yeshivas, and his Rebbe was the great tzaddik, the Mashgiach, Reb Chaskel Levenstein, Zechat Tzaddik V'Kodesh Levrachos. Reb Chaskel Levenstein was his Rebbe, was his Mashgiach. And this didn't say his name, but this particular Ben Torah, this Talmid Chacham, a later point in his life after he left the yeshiva, he ended up coming to the Chassidim. And he was someplace and he met the Mashgiach, he met Reb Chaskel. Now, you might not know this, but Reb Chaskel actually came from a Chassidish family in Warsaw, from a Ger Mishpach. But very young, his life took him to the yeshivas, which is a very holy path, but a different path. So Reb Chaskel asked this Talmud of his, tell me, what did you find by the Chassidim? What do you see by the Chassidim that you didn't find by us? And Reb Chaskel wasn't asking to hack, you understand? He wasn't a hacker. He wanted to know, what did you find by the Chassidim? What is it you're looking for by Tzama that you didn't find by us? I want to know. So this Talmid Chacham told him, Rabbi, I have tremendous hakaras Torah for the Torah that I learned in yeshiva, and from the Torah that I received from the Mashgiach, from the Rebbe, for my whole life. But when I was sitting in yeshiva, the part of davening I heard that we say every morning, I heard that in the yeshiva, I got a geschmack from those words. Who are we? We're nothing. I heard that in the yeshiva. But Rabbi, with all due respect, it was only when I came to the Chassidim that I got to the end of the tefillah. B'nei brisecha, b'nei ava my havcha. And the Talmid Chacham said that Reb Chaskel nodded his head and he understood. We're here because we're living in a dark world. And we began to scream a long time ago, all through the years of Goldsmith, but especially 2 years ago. I'm looking at a Tanya here, and it says on the Tanya, it should be a schus l'chayalei tzahal ha'imdim al mishmar atzeinu, that this was dedicated to our dear chayalim, our brothers and sisters that have risked their lives for us and that live every day trying to protect us. And when that took place, when that fell upon us, that chayshech, we screamed that ve'em l'kim hi or. So listen to the end of Mem Tes in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe writes here, you look at the whole parak, it's a hard parak, you look at the whole parak. K'dei lahalos kulam Hashem im kol ha'olam kulai v'lekolim b'yichud of Ari Yisbarach asher yoyer l'oretz v'ladorim b'chinas gilui v'nigla kved Hashem v'ol kol brosei yachtav kipi Hashem DovBer shezel tachlis ishtalshlus kol ha'olamis. The tachlis of the ishtalshlus of all worlds is what? Liyos kved Hashem loy kol ha'oretz halazu davke. That the covet of Hashem should fill this dark world davke. Because the whole tachlis of creation is what my father felt that day in Mauthausen. There's a little bit of a feeling that we felt. You remember the aura that we felt when all the beepers blew up? You remember that day? And the aura that we felt, that in the darkness that Hashem was smiling at us. And he said, we don't know how this is going to end. And the war still isn't over. But we saw that Hashem was still with us. That Hashem still loves us. The Rebbe says, the tachlis of all creation, of all worlds, is to transform the darkness into light. Is to find the tefillin over there by the fire. Yiddish tag and Chassidus, and that means that's the era of Chassidus at the end of time, when the world was falling apart, when we felt so distant from Hashem Yisbarach, and we couldn't continue on. And then Hashem Yisbarach sent the Hashem HaKadosh into the world, and the era of Chassidus. And when the Alter Rebbe was free, is Chadshim, Iris, the Chiyas HaChassidus, the Torah HaChassidus Ba'olam, on this day. Zel tachlis kavanas ha'adam ba'abadosa. And this is the tachlis of all of our avodas Hashem, is lahamshich or ein soif baruch hu lamata. Is to reveal the or ein soif baruch hu davke lamata in a world of tohu, vavohu, v'choshech, and sahayin. And that is the assignment of our generation. And that's why we're here by this event, by Tzama. That's why when I was growing up Yad Kislev, I would go to Kan Heist to see the Rebbe. I would go to Fabreng. And there was in Queens, there was a little place on Main Street where there were 10 people that sat. They would sit a little bit later on. There was a shliach over there. And now thousands and thousands of people. And go to the Svarim sale. And people walk around with filled shopping carts of Svarim HaKadoshim. More and more Svarim. The Or and the Chiyas of Chassidus, Davke at the end of time. Davke in the darkness. So I want to end with a story that I heard last year when we were together by the Share Summit. I heard from one of the wonderful Mashbiim. We had a group of Mashbiim that were together.